New York at night has never known sleep. Neon light spills down onto streets jammed with yellow cabs. And above, glass towers rise as if whispering secrets only the rich can hear. In the heart of that city, a colossal tower named Summit Capital Group stands tall, a symbol of financial power, where each signature on paper can change the fate of thousands. And in a place few notice, in the quiet hallway of the 27th floor, a 15-year-old girl is trailing after the silhouette of her mother in a deep blue work uniform. Alexandra Alex Carter, the daughter of Linda Carter, a night shift cleaner who works herself to the bone just to pay the rent on a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens. Alex doesn't work here. She only comes along with her mother, as always, so she won't have to stay home alone, to help pick up scraps of paper or wipe small panes of glass when her mother's hands tremble from exhaustion. Alex isn't like her peers. While her classmates bury their heads in TikTok or dream about prom, she reads worn-out financial documents and rewatches documentaries about the collapse of Enron. To Alex, behind dry numbers there is always a story. And in those stories, there is often a truth adults don't want anyone to see. That night, winter wind slipped through the seams of the window, making a soft hiss. Linda, tired after a long day, bent over the vacuum in the hallway. Familiar with her mother's rhythm, Alex wandered about picking up paper, gathering stray document packets. Everything went on as usual until Alex saw it. A thick stack of papers was left behind in the tray of the copy machine. The cover was embossed with the words, "Final Draft, Merger Agreement." It was the merger contract between Summit Capital Group and the financial conglomerate of Garrett Blackwell, the deal the press had been praising for weeks as the billion-dollar deal of the decade. If completed, Summit would expand its influence globally. But if something in this agreement was amiss, the price would be the entire empire. Alex froze. She glanced around, no one else in the room. Only the familiar hum of the air conditioning unit and cold white light washed over glossy tiles. Instinct urged her to pull the stack out. On the first page, dense lines of text appeared, legal language tangled like a maze. Many adults would hesitate before these terms, but to Alex, this was a puzzle. She flipped quickly through page after page, her brown eyes lit as if hunting for something familiar, and then her heart clenched. Clause 14. Section C, line 3, words smooth and deft, but they didn't slip past her. What did that sentence mean? If there was a problem, if there was litigation, all responsibility would be shoved onto Summit Capital. Garrett Blackwell's company would walk away safe, and Summit would be crushed. Alex drew a deep breath. This wasn't a typo. This was a trap. "Alex, are you done?" Her mother's voice called from the end of the hall. She started, hurriedly clipped the stack together, and put it back where it belonged. But her hand still trembled. For the rest of the shift, Alex's mind circled those lines. She could hear her heartbeat pounding in her chest. What should she do? Tell her mother? No, Linda would get angry, afraid of losing her job. Tell someone else. Who would believe a 15-year-old girl, let alone one who's the daughter of a cleaner? Alex looked at her mother's calloused hands, carefully wiping each pane of glass. She knew she had no right to put her mother in trouble. This job was the only thing keeping their small home from collapsing. But then, in the freshly polished glass, Alex saw her own reflection, a small, tired girl, yet something unusual burning in her eyes. A question echoed in her mind. If I stay silent, who will speak up? She clenched her hand, nails biting into the rubber glove. For the first time in her life, fear felt smaller than the urge to do what was right. On the upper floors of a skyscraper, where billion-dollar decisions are made, no one imagined the truth could sit neatly in the hands of a 15-year-old girl. But Alex Carter had seen it, and she knew that from that moment on, she could not turn away. The following afternoon, the 27th floor of Summit Capital Group glowed with golden light pouring through its vast glass windows. The sun dipped behind Manhattan's towers, painting the marble hallway in a dazzling sheen. Assistants rushed back and forth, arms stacked with thick files, preparing for the 0 hour. The signing ceremony of the merger with Garrett Blackwell. At the end of the hallway, Jonathan Pierce, CEO of Summit, strode forward with his familiar air of confidence. His black suit was crisp, his steps decisive, a Mont Blanc silver pen in hand, the emblem of absolute power in the boardroom about to convene. To him, this was mere procedure, a deal long charted to lift Summit to new heights. But just before the grand wooden doors bearing Summit's logo, a small figure suddenly stepped in his path. Alex Carter, still in the same old clothes, the oversized uniform shirt she had worn the night before while trailing her mother's shift. Alex looked pale. Her eyes reddened from lack of sleep. Yet her gaze blazed, as though she carried a secret larger than the skyscraper itself. Her hands trembled. But as Jonathan approached, Alex stepped forward, blocking his way. "Mr. Pierce." Her voice was small, shaky, but unbroken. "Please don't sign. A clause in that contract will make the company shoulder all the debts and lawsuits." The hallway froze. Some assistants stared wide-eyed. Others frowned in annoyance. A guard moved quickly to intervene. Jonathan halted, his cold gray eyes cutting down at the girl. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone sharp as a blade. "Alex Carter," she replied, lifting her chin. "Daughter of a janitor. But I read Clause 14. Section C. It doesn't protect Summit. It will destroy the company." Whispers rose. Some staff flipped through the documents in hand, pages rustling in search. But Jonathan did not wait. "Enough." His voice was clipped, dry. "This is no place for children." He signaled. 2 guards stepped in, seizing Alex. She struggled, tears spilling, but her voice rang out down the hushed corridor. "You'll regret it if you sign. That clause is a trap." Jonathan's grip tightened on the leather briefcase. He turned and entered the boardroom without a glance back. The heavy wooden door slammed shut, sealing away all sound, dragged past the row of waiting chairs. Alex looked like nothing more than a disruptive child being hauled away. Yet her heart pounded less from fear than from knowing she had just done something that could never be undone. One sentence throbbed in her mind, drumming like a heartbeat. "I have spoken." And inside the boardroom, as the polite laughter subsided, Jonathan set his case upon the table. He did not immediately open the contract. His hand still clutched the silver pen, but his mind replayed the girl's words. A child, warning him about Clause 14. A seed of doubt, small but sharp, began to take root in the mind of Jonathan Pierce. That afternoon, after the crowd of employees had clocked out, a wooden chair in the HR office still held the warmth of a mother and daughter sitting across from a woman in a gray suit. On the desk lay a stack of papers, her fountain pen tapping in a steady rhythm like the ticking of a clock. "Mrs. Carter," the woman began, her voice rigid, "we must reconsider your night shift position, and allowing a minor to appear in a restricted meeting area is entirely inappropriate." Linda sat upright, her face drained. "She only came with me. She didn't mean to cause trouble. Alex is still in school." "Regardless," HR cut in, "both you and your daughter will be barred from returning to the building until an official decision is made." The door clicked shut, the sound like a verdict. On the way home, Manhattan winds whipped through the noisy streets, but inside Linda's chest was only a storm. She gripped her daughter's hand tightly, walking in haste. When they reached the small apartment in Queens, she dropped the keys on the table, the metallic clatter on wood sharp and dry. "Alexandra," Linda said, her voice taut but trembling, "do you know what I've had to sacrifice to keep that job? We survive on that meager paycheck. You think blocking the CEO in a hallway would help anything? You've just cost us everything." Alex stepped back, eyes wet. She wanted to fight back, to explain the deadly clause she had seen. But the words snagged in her throat. Instead, she sank into the rickety chair by the window. Hugging her knees, the tiny room fell silent, broken only by the muffled TV sounds from the neighbor's wall. Alex opened her battered old laptop, its scratched casing reflecting the glow of the dim screen. She scrolled aimlessly, her mind tangled. Then ping, a new email. Sender, Robert Barnes. Subject, I saw this too. You were right. Alex clicked, her eyes widening. I used to be a legal advisor at Summit. 2 years ago, I uncovered a clause just like that in another deal. I warned them, but no one listened. They pushed me out. I lost my job for speaking up. You're not mistaken. I know what it feels like to be dismissed. If you want to talk, I'm here to listen, Alex gasped. Her fingers trembled above the keyboard. Someone else had seen. Someone believed her. She turned toward her mother, ready to speak, but Linda sat curled on the sofa, eyes shut tight, as if to shut out every nightmare. Alex bit her lip, swallowing the words. In the still apartment, the girl typed her reply. For the first time in hours, a fragile thread of light wove into her heart. She was not alone. Across the city, at the very top of Summit, Jonathan Pierce sat in his office, the thick contract unsigned before him. He flipped to Clause 14. His eyes traced it again and again, each sharp word shaping itself into a legal trap. The silver pen rested untouched on the desk. His fingers froze, and in that quiet moment, the image of a 15-year-old girl in the hallway, eyes steady, cutting through fear, rose vividly before him. Jonathan closed his eyes, leaning back in his chair, letting one thought slowly rise. That child was right. Manhattan at night. The hotel bar on Park Avenue blazed like a stage. Crystal glasses clinked. Polite laughter rang beneath golden light spilling across evening gowns and tailored suits. Yet in one corner, behind frosted glass, the air was entirely different. Jonathan Pierce sat at the bar, the glass of wine before him untouched. He did not drink. His eyes were locked on a private table in the corner. There, Vanessa Pierce, his wife, smiled radiantly. Across from her sat Garrett Blackwell. Jonathan saw it clearly. Garrett slid a silver flash drive across the table. Vanessa received it with the ease of someone long accustomed. When Garrett's hand brushed hers, her smile never faltered. Too smooth, too seamless, as if rehearsed many times before. Jonathan turned away, his throat tight. Beneath the sway of jazz, he felt coldness draining his blood. Across the city, in the small apartment in Queens, Alex Carter sat before her battered laptop, the glow of the screen igniting the determination in her eyes. A new email from Robert Barnes appeared. With a file hundreds of pages long, here is the list of deals over the last 10 years where Garrett Blackwell had a hand. The common thread, transfer of liability clauses, partner companies bore the debts and lawsuits. 6 months later, they collapsed. Garrett stripped the money and disappeared. Summit is only the next prey. Alex scrolled, eyes racing down the lines. Company names piled one after another, all once giants, now ashes in the market. She bit her lip, flipping to the annotations. Barnes's words glared in red ink. If no one stops him, Summit will be next. A chill swept her spine. Inside a penthouse overlooking Central Park, Vanessa Pierce sat at her private desk. The glow of the laptop sculpted her flawless face. She typed a few commands, her gaze calm, as if shopping online. Yet on the screen lay an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. From Summit's dormant reserve fund, a transfer was being prepared. The number glared. $2,500,000. Her finger hovered above the mouse, only one click away. At that moment, an email alert popped up. Internal compliance alert. Suspicious transfer blocked. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. Her lips pressed together, but swiftly she closed the window. Jonathan returned to his office late. The floor lay in darkness, only his desk lamp casting light over the thick contract. Sleep was far from him. Opening the safe, he pulled out an old internal audit report. On the first page, handwritten notes in red from Robert Barnes. 2 years ago, leapt out. Risk exposure. If a trap clause is inserted, Summit will have no escape. Jonathan turned the pages, his grip tightening, heartbeat quickening. The report, once dismissed as too pessimistic, now unfolded into reality. He exhaled, glancing at his phone. A bank alert flashed. Attempted transfer. $2,500,000. Blocked. In that instant, Jonathan understood. This was no longer a business deal, it was a battlefield. It wasn't only Garrett Blackwell weaving traps. The woman he had trusted completely, who shared his home for 20 years, had her hand on the knife. In his mind, the board was laid bare. Garrett with bought-out board members, Vanessa with media in her grip, and shadowy politicians and lawyers ready to bury any file. Jonathan clenched his fist, a single thought ringing clear. In this game, One misstep is suicide. When I strike, it must be final. His eyes lifted, no longer the weary gaze of a betrayed CEO, but the steel of a man who had chosen the only path left, to fight to the end. On the rickety chair in Queens, Alex shut her laptop. Her chest knotted. What Barnes had sent was no longer a theory. It was the truth. Knocking at Summit's door, she turned toward her mother, Linda asleep on the sofa, arms clutching the worn pillow. Alex's hand tightened, her eyes gleaming with resolve. "I saw it," she whispered into the dark, "and I won't let them bury it." At opposite ends of the city, two people, a CEO and a 15-year-old girl, looked toward the same truth. A filthy scheme closing in on Summit Capital, and between them, one powerful woman plotted with every click to push the empire into the abyss. The next morning, before the first light of day crept into the narrow streets of Queens, a thin brown envelope sat in the Carter's mailbox. Alex was the first to spot it. Scrawled across the front in clumsy handwriting were just two letters, "Empathy Fool." Inside was a small USB stick and a torn, sticky note. "This is everything I have. Don't look for me. R.B." Alex clutched the note, her heartbeat pounding. She plugged the USB into her battered old laptop, and instantly dozens of files appeared. Financial reports, shell company charts, lists of offshore transfers. Every path led back to one name, Garrett Blackwell. But one detail choked her breath. Alongside Garrett's name, line after line also bore the name Vanessa Pierce. Alex gripped the USB tight, eyes locked on the glowing screen. She started to type a reply, only to find Robert Barnes's contact gone. Her inbox flashed coldly. "User does not exist." Barnes had vanished. In Manhattan, Jonathan Pierce sat alone in his office, phone pressed to his ear. Unanswered calls looping into silence. Barnes's number was dead. Jonathan dropped his head to the desk, eyes fixed on the contract that mocked him with its silence. He knew he was standing alone on fractured ground. That was when a name returned to him, a lawyer who had once shaken Wall Street with a lawsuit against a massive insurance giant, Valerie Chen. That evening, Jonathan met her in a small cafe by the Hudson. Valerie walked in, her black coat brushed with rain, her eyes cold yet blazing. "Mr. Pierce," she said, setting her briefcase down, "do you know what you're stepping into? This isn't just contractual fraud. This is a network." Jonathan was silent for a long moment, then drew a folder from his case. "I know, and I need you, not to save me, but to save the company. And there's another witness, a girl, who saw what the entire board overlooked." Valerie arched a brow. "A girl," Jonathan nodded. "Her name is Alex Carter, daughter of a janitor." But her eyes cut through what an entire legal team missed. 2 days later, in the cramped Queens apartment, Alex opened the door and froze. Standing before her was the man she had once blocked in the hallway, Jonathan Pierce. Beside him stood a slender woman, hair tied back, eyes sharp as a blade. Valerie Chen. Linda fell silent in shock, while Alex stepped back, her heart hammering. Jonathan did not circle. He sank into the worn chair and looked directly at Alex. "You were right. That clause was a trap. And Barnes, he disappeared after sending the files to both of us." Valerie set a thick folder on the table. "If you're willing, we'll stand together. Not just to save Summit, but to drag the truth into the light." Alex gazed at the two adults before her, a CEO once untouchable, a lawyer who carried the storm in her presence. She drew a deep breath. Barnes's hurried note flashed in her mind. "Don't look for me." She placed the USB on the table, her eyes burning bright. "If we want to win, we start from here." Jonathan and Valerie exchanged a glance, then nodded. In that small apartment, an unlikely alliance was forged, a financial titan doubting his own household, a lawyer sharp as steel, and a 15-year-old girl no one had ever taken seriously. They knew, from this moment on, the game was no longer about numbers. It had become a battle of survival to bring the truth into the light. The message appeared on Alex's phone one late afternoon, just as she left high school. The words were short, cold. "We know where you live. Stay silent if you want to be safe." Alex froze at the school gates, the screen trembling in her hand. Amid the laughter of classmates spilling out, She felt as if the city itself had fallen silent. She shoved the phone into her pocket and quickened her pace toward the bus stop. But as twilight closed in, Alex realized one thing. Someone was following her. A black car crawled behind, headlights dim and murky. Her heartbeat pounded out of rhythm. She turned into a familiar alleyway leading back to Queens, masking her rising panic. Yet the sound of footsteps echoed behind her steady. Heavy, Alex began to run. Her sneakers slapped against damp concrete, breath ragged. She tore through a parking lot, bolted onto a main road, her chest about to burst. An arm lunged from the shadows. She twisted away. Crashing to the ground, a taxi screeched, horn blaring, its yellow light flooding the moment. When she lifted her head, the figure was gone. Only the chill down her spine remained. That night, Linda cradled her daughter in their cramped apartment, trembling. Her hands rubbed together ceaselessly, as if to erase the fear. "Alex, we have to stop," she whispered. "You're only 15. I can't lose you to this fight." Alex lifted her tear-brimmed eyes. "Mom, if I stay silent, Summit will collapse. They'll keep deceiving people, stealing everything from families like ours. I can't." Linda covered her face, tears breaking loose. She had lived her life quietly, enduring, but when she looked into her daughter's burning gaze, she knew this courage could not be extinguished. She held Alex tight, whispering through sobs, "You're not wrong. If they want to hurt you, they'll have to go through me first." At the same time, inside the glittering hall of the Waldorf Astoria, the Summit Capitol Gala unfolded. Hundreds of guests in tuxedos and evening gowns raised glasses beneath chandeliers of crystal. At center stage, Jonathan Pierce stepped up to the podium. Conversations died into silence. He scanned the room, shareholders, investors, Wall Street's powerful faces all staring back. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jonathan began, his voice low yet steady, "tonight, we gather to celebrate Summit's achievements. But before I speak of the future, I must admit something. The ballroom stilled. For years, we believed every number, every contract was airtight. We thought we couldn't be wrong." He paused, his stern gaze sweeping across furrowed brows. "But the truth is, at times we've been blind. We ignored signals, details that seemed trivial. And then there was one person, not a board member, not a shareholder, not even an employee who saw what we refused to see." A wave of murmurs rippled. Jonathan pressed on, voice harder. "That person is a girl whom everyone dismissed. And she is the one who saved Summit from a catastrophic fall." No one in the hall dared breathe. Near the bar, Vanessa stood rigid, her hand whitening around a glass. Jonathan gave a small nod, closing, "Tonight, I don't speak as a CEO. I speak as a man who knows he was wrong and knows he must make it right. Summit doesn't only need profit. Summit needs the truth." Applause began hesitantly, scattered, then swelled louder. But beneath it lurked sharp glances, whispered suspicion. On the drive back, Jonathan sat in his car, eyes on the city lights streaming past. In the rearview mirror, he caught his own reflection, a man stepping out of safety and into the hardest battle of his life. Somewhere across the city, a girl and her mother gripped each other's hands, silently vowing not to retreat. And Jonathan knew they were no longer fighting alone. Rumors spread faster than any email. Within 48 hours of the gala, Wall Street buzzed. Summit Capital was under internal investigation. Major newspapers leaked the story. CEO Jonathan Pierce admits to governance loopholes. Sources confirm a teenage witness has become the key. Headlines blazed across Times Square billboards, stirring chaos. Shareholders grew restless, and employees whispered over coffee near headquarters. Meanwhile, Valerie Chen moved swiftly. She filed an emergency motion in federal court to halt approval of the merger until the investigation concluded, and requested a protective order for Alex Carter. The court had yet to rule. But the move was enough to unsettle Garrett Blackwell. In a luxury hotel suite, Garrett sat across from Vanessa Pierce. Rain tapped against the window. "The leaks are out," Vanessa said, voice sharp as a blade. "Jonathan has pulled a lawyer in. And that girl? She's under protection." Garrett sneered, swirling wine in his glass. "If we don't crush this now, everything collapses." Vanessa met his eyes, unflinching. Then crush it. In front of the entire board. We turn Jonathan into a man out of control. Turn that girl into a joke. Once the media swallows that, no one will believe them. 3 days later, Summit Capital's grand boardroom overflowed. Shareholders, executives, journalists all crammed under the harsh lights. Outside, hundreds of reporters waited, recorders armed. This wasn't just a board meeting. It had become a public tribunal. At the head of the table sat Jonathan Pierce, posture straight, with Valerie Chen at his side and, to many people's surprise, a slight figure, Alex Carter. She wore a navy blazer borrowed from Valerie, her face still youthful but her eyes blazing. Whispers swelled. That's her. That kid. What could she possibly know? Jonathan tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, today I speak not only of profit, I speak of truth. He gestured. Valerie rose, laying a thick file across the table, spreading out page by page. This is the merger contract you were shown. And this, she opened her laptop. The projector flashing behind her is an internal email proving the liability clause was deliberately inserted. The screen lit up. Words appeared. Undeniable. The room erupted in noise. Alex drew a breath and handed Valerie the USB. Valerie slid it in, her voice steady. And this is the most critical piece. An audio recording. The speakers rang out. Crisp. Chilling. Vanessa's voice. If he suspects, remind him what he stands to lose. Garrett's voice. Then he won't dare speak. Silence crushed the room. Vanessa's face blanched, her hand clawing the chair. Garrett shot up, face flushed, roaring. This is fabricated. A cheap stunt. You'd believe a child over me. Jonathan didn't flinch. His gaze pinned Garrett. Voice calm. If we let this contract pass, Summit will no longer be ours. It will be a death sentence disguised as numbers. I believe the truth. And truth does not need permission to exist. Just as Garrett lunged toward the table, the doors swung open. 2 FBI agents in black suits entered, warrant in hand. One read aloud, voice cutting, Garrett Blackwell. Vanessa Pierce, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit financial fraud, contract manipulation, and cross-border money laundering. You have the right to remain silent. Camera flashes exploded. The boardroom erupted in chaos. Vanessa sat frozen, her face ashen. Garrett thrashed, shouting, "You'll regret this. I have protection." But his voice drowned beneath the metallic snap of handcuffs locking shut. The second agent declared firmly, "By court order, all merger files between Summit Capital and Blackwell Financial are seized for investigation." Jonathan rose, eyes cold, watching the two who once shared his table, now led away in chains. Beside him, Alex gripped Valerie's hand, her heart pounding. But in her eyes, no fear remained, only the radiant spark of their first victory. Outside Summit's tower, the press surged. Headlines fired instantly. Summit Capital exposes corrupt merger scheme. 15-year-old girl unmasks billion-dollar fraud. Amid the frenzy, Jonathan stepped out, flashbulbs blinding. He said little, only turned toward Alex and spoke clearly enough for the microphones to catch. This girl saw what all of us overlooked. That is why Summit still stands today. Cheers erupted, shutters clicked, and in that moment, a famed CEO, a steel-edged lawyer, and a 15-year-old girl together turned the tide. The war was not over, but the balance had shifted. That morning, Grand Central Station overflowed, but every gaze turned toward one place. Federal Court No. Antwerp. News of the Summit Capital case had erupted into a media storm. Dozens of broadcast trucks lined the street. Reporters jostled, microphones thrust forward, handwritten placards waved in the crowd. "We believe Alex. Truth has no age." Inside the courtroom, light poured down onto rows of polished wooden benches. The air was heavy. Garrett Blackwell sat at the defendant's table, arrogance still curling his lips. Beside him, Vanessa Pierce, meticulously made up, her eyes hollow. Jonathan Pierce occupied the front row reserved for witnesses, his face carved in resolve. And in the back sat Alex Carter, a 15-year-old girl in a simple dress, braids neatly tied. She looked small in the solemn chamber, but her eyes shone unshaken. The judge's gavel cracked. Court is in session. Valerie Chen stepped forward, voice precise. Your Honor, the prosecution calls its first witness, Alex Carter. The room stirred. A few scoffed. Journalists scrambled, recorders snapping on. Alex walked to the stand, placing her hand on the Bible. Her voice was soft, but firm. I swear to tell the truth. Valerie approached. Alex, can you tell the court why you are part of this story? Alex drew a breath. I was with my mom. She's a janitor working the night shift at Summit. That night, I found the merger documents left in a copy machine. I read them, and I saw a clause that wasn't right. Valerie nodded. Specifically, what was that clause? Alex's voice rang steady. Clause 14. Section C. It forced Summit to bear all debts and lawsuits, while Blackwell Financial walked away free. It was a trap. Gasps swept the courtroom. The defense attorney leapt up. Your Honor, this witness is a child. How could she possibly understand complex legal language? Alex turned, her gaze calm yet unyielding. Just because I work on the floor doesn't mean I can't see what happens above it. The words reverberated. Silence. Then a rush of whispers and furious typing from the press benches. The judge rapped for order, but even his eyes betrayed surprise. Next came Jonathan Pierce. He mounted the stand, his voice deep. Each word weighted. That day, a girl stopped me outside the boardroom. I didn't believe her at first, but when I reviewed the contract, I realized I was about to sign Summit's death sentence. I've led this company for years, but sometimes a 15-year-old can see clearer than an entire board of directors. The statement sliced through the chamber. Shareholders in attendance lowered their heads. Reporters scribbled frantically, seizing the golden quote. Then Vanessa took the stand. Her heels struck sharply against the wood, posture poised, but her hands clenched tight. Valerie cued the audio. From the speakers came Vanessa's own voice. If he suspects, remind him what he stands to lose. Vanessa's face drained. She forced composure. That was doctored. I only wanted to protect Summit, Valerie pressed. So receiving transfers into your offshore account in the Caymans under your name, that was also for Summit's protection. Vanessa faltered. The gallery held its breath. Finally, her voice cracked. I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought if I pushed the deal through, Jonathan would never know. But the girl, she saw everything. And I went too far. The room erupted. Cameras flashed. For the first time, Vanessa bowed her head. Her arrogance shattered. When the arguments concluded, the judge addressed the jury. Have you reached a verdict? The foreperson rose, voice firm. We find the defendant Garrett Blackwell guilty on charges of conspiracy to commit financial fraud, contract manipulation, and cross-border money laundering. We find the defendant Vanessa Pierce guilty as an accomplice to financial fraud, abuse of corporate power, and concealment of illegal transfers. The gavel struck. Sentence: 10 years in federal prison. No parole within the first 7. Garrett roared, thrashing in cuffs. Vanessa collapsed into her chair. Face blank. Outside, the media frenzy exploded. Headlines blanketed front pages. Teen whistleblower saves Summit from billion-dollar trap. Truth has no age. 15-year-old faces down Wall Street. News stations replayed Alex's line. Just because I work on the floor doesn't mean I can't see what happens above it. A phrase that instantly became a symbol. A hashtag flooding social media. Jonathan emerged with Valerie and Alex. Reporters surged, microphones thrust forward. Jonathan simply rested a hand on Alex's shoulder, speaking quietly but clearly enough for every camera. This girl reminded us that truth can come from anywhere, and because of that, Summit still stands today. Alex lifted her face, her smile trembling yet radiant. Amid the crowd, amid the storm of flashes, she was no longer the shadow trailing her mother through the night. She was a voice that could not be ignored. The following spring, Summit Capital's glass tower was no longer the cold fortress it once was. White curtains were drawn wide to welcome the light. The great meeting rooms changed, too. Not only charts of revenue anymore, but posters hung high with the words, "Ethics first." After the storm, Jonathan Pierce kept his promise. He restructured the company from top to bottom, replacing board members once been compromised. And for the first time in Summit's history, A new title was created, Chief Advisor for Ethics and Transparency. The role was entrusted to Valerie Chen. At the announcement ceremony, Valerie stood at the podium, her voice sharp yet warm. A company is only strong when it dares to face the truth. Summit learned that lesson from a girl we once overlooked. Hundreds of employees applauded. Many glanced quietly at Alex sitting in the front row, cheeks flushed with shyness. Weeks later, in Summit's grand hall, Jonathan took the stage for a special event. Behind him, a large screen displayed the words, "The Alexandra Carter Fellowship for young voices who dare to speak the truth." Jonathan spoke slowly, his voice resonant in the hushed room. "We stand here today because of a 15-year-old girl, the daughter of a janitor, who spoke up when all of us stayed silent. To honor that courage, Summit will now award an annual fellowship to young people who dare to stand for the truth, no matter their background." Cameras flashed, eyes welled. From a corner, Linda Carter clutched her daughter's hand, whispering, "I'm proud of you." Alex tried to smile, but her heart thudded. In her bag lay an opened envelope, a full scholarship acceptance letter from Columbia University. The bold words, "Welcome to Columbia," stung her eyes each time she read them. One late afternoon, Jonathan stood alone in his top-floor office. He carefully placed Alex's acceptance letter on a wooden shelf, right beside an old bronze plaque engraved with the words he had always believed. "Truth does not need to shout, but it endures." The sunset poured gold across the room. Jonathan gazed out over the city, a soft smile easing his face. In his eyes were not contracts or numbers, but the image of a courageous girl who had changed an empire. Alex's story spread across America. The press hailed her as the teen whistleblower. Talk shows invited her. Schools honored her as a model of bravery. But for Alex, the most important thing was this: once dismissed, invisible in the polished corridors of a corporation, she had become a symbol of faith and justice. She understood now. Truth does not distinguish age or status. It can come from a CEO, from a lawyer, or from a girl trailing her mother's night shift with a mop in hand. When night fell over Manhattan and neon lights blazed again, Summit's tower no longer stood merely as a symbol of financial might. It stood as proof of this, a small voice, if born of truth, can change an empire. When night falls over Manhattan and the neon lights blaze again, Summit's tower no longer stands merely as a symbol of financial power. It stands as proof of this. A small voice, if born of truth, can change an empire. And perhaps you, the one listening to this story, have also felt small, dismissed, as if your voice carried no weight. But remember, truth is not bound to status, and courage does not wait for adulthood. If Alex's story has touched your heart, share it, so more people will know that truth can begin with anyone, even with you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, so together we can keep spreading stories that bring hope, faith, and strength. And I want to hear your story. Have you ever witnessed or experienced a moment when a small voice created a great change? Share it in the comments below. Your story may be the spark that gives someone else the courage to stand up.